Hello and welcome to Unshakable with Lovell Casiero. I am really excited about our guest today. And my question for you is, do you think you can be a female founder if you don't have a husband? We're going to find out today when we talk to Sara Murray, owner and founder of Mermaid International. And she has done an amazing job of building a beautiful business based on, first of all, her authentic self, leaving the corporate world because she felt being her authentic self was holding her back. So now she has no one to hold her back. She is a very successful female founder. And I believe that her success comes from one mantra that she lives by. ABAV, always be adding value. I'll be right back and we'll welcome Sara Murray to tell us her unshakable story.
I see hate through the pain, I see light in the rain. Dreams of brighter days, tell me what you're thinking. I have hope in my spirit, flames of love in my heart. Baby, let me tell you something, I'm about to dance. You realized you're not in control. Once again, tell you once again. Hallelujah, I'm on my way to be the best version of me. Mama knows how to wake you up to dance. Mama knows you're not a mama knows how to wake you up to dance. Mama knows how to wake you up to dance. Mama knows you're not a mama knows how to wake you up to dance.
Hi, Sara. It is awesome to have you on Unshakable with Lovell Casiero today.
Hi, Lovell. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me as a guest. I feel so honored.
Well, and thank you for having me as a guest on your recent live on LinkedIn. So looking forward to sharing that here on all of my channels really soon. So we know each other through Female Founders, which is an amazing organization that you are a really big part of. So I'd love to just provide a little shout out for female founders on the podcast today. So why don't you just tell us how you got involved?
So Female Founders in Hospitality was started about 3 years ago by Nina Cleveland, and she really saw a need for women who were building businesses in the hospitality space to really support one another. And so she started a small cohort community. It's now grown to, I think, around 270 members strong in about 23 different countries. So it's a really amazing space for women who have started businesses in the hospitality space to really come together, support each other, hire one another. And yeah, we met at the inaugural summit in New York City. So it was so nice to meet you. And I think we kind of have similar backgrounds with our hospitality construction life and now building our consulting firm. So it's nice to have a fellow founder and mentor in my network.
Absolutely. And the event in New York was awesome. And I look forward to the next one. It was your first in-person event, and I wasn't even in a cohort yet, but I came away with so many people that I met and the networking. And I always say, both you and I cut our teeth in hospitality sales, and you had some construction in your background. I've opened a lot of hotels myself, but I always say about sales, my one tagline that I tell everybody is, I have a tagline about leadership, but my tagline about sales is make the relationship and the business will come. And that's how I feel about what I'm doing now as well. Like, I have not really, somebody asked me, how do you get guests for your podcast? I said, I just ask, my favorite question to ask people now is, what's your story? And I believe everybody has a story. So we recently had an opportunity to talk about your story and how you started your business. And I think there are not just so many women out there, but just individuals that are out there that have an idea and have a vision and a company that they would really like to start, but both you and I know it's not for the weak of heart.
Mm-hmm.
So where were you, what were you doing right before you decided to launch?
Yeah. And I think my story probably echoes some other founders' stories who were impacted by the COVID pandemic. So I would say, I was preparing for this interview and I was thinking about the journey and kind of being guided along the path to this point. And I really got to this point in my corporate life where, hospitality is wonderful because people that get into the hospitality industry like other people. And so I love that there was some shared values there. And one of the things that I felt really helped me succeed in all of my corporate sales roles was the ability to make relationships. I could always get to the top guy or gal. I could always get to the decision maker, and I would be able to articulate the business value of partnering with me versus product facts and figures and benefits. Like, it was always business to business. Let's collaborate and do business together. But I could always make it to the decision maker. And I knew it was because of my ability to build relationships. And it got to a point where so many of my colleagues were like, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? And it was just one of those things where I thought, I bet I could teach people how to do this. And so that was kind of the first spark. And then the second spark that really, and I feel like this might resonate with a lot of people, I loved the job I was doing. I had a really great job leading the North America hospitality business for a global manufacturer. But it just got to a point in my corporate ladder journey where I had this version of Sara who was authentic and fun and youthful and could get to the boss and get to get them to sign the $1 million check. But then in order to grow in a leadership role at my corporate life, I had to put on a different face. And it just felt so inauthentic to who I was. And I just really couldn't see the ability to keep growing without losing my authentic self. And my authentic self was my superpower that got me to where I was. Right. So it sort of came to make a decision, like a fork in the road. And I did tell them when I resigned, I don't think I continue to grow here and be my authentic self. And we spend so much of our waking hours at work. That was my secret sauce. I thought I could go teach people how to embrace their authentic selves and use that as their strength to go build business and generate sales and build companies. So that was really kind of the origin story. And I exited my former employer in a really great way. We still have a great relationship. They hired me back as a consultant. So I'm really proud of how I exited, but it really came down to, we have so many waking hours in a day, limited time on this earth. What do I want to be doing with it? And construction in that environment was not what I wanted to do.
Twice today, you've sent music to my ear, like one was in an email earlier. But if you read Lead Like a Girl, and it's the book I wrote on leadership. And I always say this, what the surprise was when I was writing the book was that I thought I would write a book about leadership lessons and best practices for leaders. And I had at that point in time been leading leaders. And that's a little bit more challenging when you're leading people that are actually leaders themselves. So I thought, it'd be a great book to write, given my years in hospitality and working, above property for portfolios of hotels. However, what I realized, in order to write the leadership lessons, I had to write the life lessons. And the life lessons required, one of my favorite words in the English language is authenticity. And it required me to get real with who I was, tell some stories, the decades that built me, tell some stories that maybe I would have left that part out, but they did guide me to become the person that I am today. And so the part of your origin story that I love is you felt like you were showing up at a job every day, even though you were working with great people and you had a great job, but you couldn't be you. And sometimes I have experienced being me doesn't always work for the people that are around me, but then maybe I need new people. So that's, one of the things that I love about you. And I know that we're going to be lifelong friends because we, even just meeting, have so many similarities. How much, praying did you do before you decided to start your own business?
It's really funny because I think my view on praying, I got into meditating right before the pandemic. And so I would always do dry January. And so January 2020, there was a meditation studio a stone's throw away from my apartment, so close. And so multiple weeknights, it was a nice kind of way to end my work day. And I'd go to a meditation class, and it was all different types of meditation, breath work, guided, just all different types of meditation. And that became, and then of course the pandemic happened in Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles. It was a very strict lockdown for a very long time. So we were alone in our homes for a long time. And so I joined meditation groups. I did a lot of meditating and a lot of journaling. And what started to happen was I would get, I don't want to say downloads. I don't know the right language to use here, but I would get guidance in my meditations that really did feel like it was coming from maybe my higher self or a higher power, but it was very much being guided. And it was enough times of these little clues that it's like, okay, I think this is what's going to have to be the path that I take. And there was a woman who I followed, and I did her meditation groups. Her name's Jen Casey. And Jen has a business, and she had this quote that really stuck with me, that she looks at her business as a vehicle for her own spiritual expansion. And that really sat with me. Because it's like, okay, I know how to do this job really well, but there's a lot of skills I don't have that I want to learn. And I just wanted to take part in a bigger conversation. And so a big motivator for me was, all right, if I start the business, I'm going to be forced to be uncomfortable. I'm going to be forced to do things I don't know how to do. And definitely, I do not feel like I could have taken the leap without a belief in myself, but also faith that I would be guided and it would work out. And so I think that if it were not for starting the meditation and the journaling, I think that has really helped be a catalyst and a channel for me to get guidance and messages and a response back to my prayers and my concerns. So that was something that I think was a blessing for me coming out of the pandemic, was I have a much deeper spiritual practice than I had ever had before.
I come from I'm fourth generation to work in ministry in my family, and prayer has always been a huge part of my life. My spirituality has always been a big part. I used to say to people, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And now I just basically say, I have a relationship with God. I have a father-daughter relationship with God. And so, but I also am very much into the meditation and the mindfulness that it takes to meditate, because you have to get all of those ticker tape thoughts out of your head that that are telling you can't when you're meditating. That's part of what you have to do. You have to shut those voices down. And I want to talk to you more about that offline, because I have a really hard time really shutting my mind down to really get into meditation, but I am constantly doing moving meditation, walking down the beach, talking to God, driving in my car, talking it out. And what you experienced, what we call in ministry, what you experienced was discernment. So you had this vision, and you were thinking of this vision that you wanted to do, and you knew what your skills were. And you knew that those skills could impact others. I tell everybody who comes on Unshakable, it's not as much about the conversation that we're having today. What I'm seeing and what I'm hoping for is the impact it will have on somebody who's been sitting on the sidelines, wondering if they could actually be successful at starting a business. And so your story has the ability to take legs and help so many people. So when you decided that you were going to leave your big corporate job is what I always called mine. I left my big corporate job. When you left that job, what was the responses that you got from those people around you?
Well, it's so funny because when I quit, it was like 3 buckets of responses. First, it was either the group of people where they were saying, if anyone can start a business, if anyone can figure it out, it's you. Like the hype team, they really believed in me and had my back. And the second group of people was really interesting. It was a lot of you're so brave, which I didn't really feel brave at the time. So it was kind of you're so brave. And then there was a subcategory that's you're so brave to be doing this without a partner, without a husband, because I'm single. And that one always threw me off because, and now that I started it, I understand what they were saying. Like it is really hard to pay your bills when you don't have money coming in. So I did have to lean on other people for support during the beginning. And then the third category of people was funny because it was a lot of the people I was leaving that I would be fine if I never talked to again, that bucket of people. And all of their responses are, we're so envious of you. It's like, okay.
Wow.
Well, so those were kind of the 3. And I chose to focus on the people that were saying, you can do it. You can do it. If anyone can do it, it's you. Keep going. And so those messages really did help me. And at the beginning, I'm coming from a sales background. I'm used to measuring my success in dollars, right? Sales numbers don't lie. And I was always on top. And now all of a sudden, I don't have any money coming in. It's hard to figure out like which way to point the boat. And I started to measure, I started a poster board, and it was just whenever someone would show up and help me, or whenever someone would tell me I was inspiring them or that I helped them, I would write their name on a heart-shaped Post-it note and stick it on my poster board. Or if they wrote me a card, I started a podcast and I would get, notes or cards from my listeners, and I'd print them out and put them on the board. And so that was, I think, a really good motivator when I was starting, because you aren't being measured in the traditional ways that you're used to. And so your value, a lot of times our value is tied to our salaries and our work output and our sales numbers. And so I had to shift how I measured my success. And that was something that was really challenging at the beginning. But having the support of people that believed in me just helped so much.
Sara, there's a couple of things I want to go back to. And one of them is you were talking about you knew what your skills were and what you were good at. But you also knew in order to run a business and have your own business, being an entrepreneur, sometimes we are now referred to as solopreneur, but you have to realize what you don't know. And the other thing that I'm finding out is that you have a lot more time on your hands that you had than you had when you were on Zoom calls from 8:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. You have a lot more time on your hands. It requires a lot more discipline, but to be able to know, like, what should I be working on during this time, and kind of have a plan, because we went from a very fast-paced corporate world into we're kind of chief cook and bottle washer of our companies. Correct. Right? I mean, you're much further down the road than I am. And I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. And I want to get to that as well. But this week, I have spent a lot of my week teaching myself how to use my CRM and teaching myself, and I am so proud of this, how to use Canva. But I always had people for that. Like, I always had somebody. And because as I was building this business over the last 3 years, I still was working and I had money to just hire it done. And now it's like, to your point, you have to be more frugal about how you're spending the available dollars and have a budget for your business. Just like I always required a hotel to have a budget. And it was so gratifying and so satisfying to actually be able to look at the assets that I created. It took me a minute. It took me a little while, but at the end of it, I had created something that I could be very proud of. And I was like, okay, now I have a new skill set. I preach lifelong learning in some of the blogs and things that I do. And I am really embracing that now. And I think it's amazing.
I love that. And I mean, it's a vehicle for your expansion. And I think about, you're absolutely right. Losing the structure is challenging. So I had to build in a lot of external accountability. That's the way I only ever get anything done, is external accountability. And I have a podcast. It's called Prospecting on Purpose. The podcast was a really helpful vehicle to do that, because every Monday I'm going to do this. And it just gave me a nice reason to build my Rolodex of helpers too, because when you have guests on the podcast, you get to learn a little bit more about what they do. They get to learn about you. And now, like, you and I, Lovell, have a connection because of the podcast time we've spent together. And so I look at the podcast as sort of the queen bee that helps all of the other offshoots. You know, you're learning, you're building your network, you're getting leads, you're getting references. But you're right. It takes a lot of external accountability. And from a sales side of things, this is what I have a sales training program. And so a big part of what I teach is how to be disciplined and how to be self-motivated, because the only way you're going to get to your objectives is to execute. I think a lot of people take action and they have a lot of ideas, but the execution is where people get stuck. And so I am a big proponent of, on July 23rd, I'm going to do a webinar, and I got to get everything done before July 23rd and just reverse engineer what's going to happen on July 23rd. So that's a big part of what's motivated me, both in corporate and in self-employment, but also what I teach to the people in my workshop. Like, okay, what's the date you're going to get this done by? And then reverse engineer the steps to do it. And it's been so fun, because now I'm seeing all of the outputs from those clients that I've worked with over the years. And it's been amazing. Like, one team increased their close rate from 20% to 38% in one year.
Amazing.
Just because they're doing the tasks, they're executing. So it's been really cool. Another client I worked with, they brought me on, and the sales number that they were at when they hired me in the entire year, they just hit in Q1 of 2026.
Oh, wow.
So I'm starting to see, like, I think at the beginning, it's hard to tell if what you're doing works because you don't have data points.
That's right.
But now I feel like I'm in year 4. I'm starting to have some data points. It's such a different way I'm showing up, and because I can kind of prove the results that I couldn't before.
You know, it's funny that you said that. We are very result driven. And for my entire career, I have been responsible for delivering the top line in a hotel or in a portfolio of hotels. I often tell people how, when I left my on-property job for my first above-property job, I went running and skipping out the door saying, I'll never have to do a budget and marketing plan again. And I think in Q4 of last year, when I was still with PM Hotel Group, we had to deliver more than 70 budgets and marketing plans. So I always say, be careful what you ask for. Yeah, be careful. But I have also struggled a little bit with that, like, you know, looking at the outcome like I normally would look at the outcome. And this morning, my devotional actually talked about not measuring yourself in the worldly way. I'm paraphrasing this. I'm probably not doing as good a job as the person who wrote the devotional, but not measuring your success in the worldly way with analytics and things like that, but measure the impact, which, you know, resonated with me, because that's the whole reason for, as I just said, for having these conversations, is to make sure that there is a valuable impact to the listeners, because it would be in vain if, you know, it'd be a waste of our time to be sitting here talking if somebody doesn't get inspired by this. And I know that they will. Let's talk a little bit. Let's give a shout out for your company. What's the name of your company, and what are all the services that you do?
Sure. So you are going to laugh. When I am very much into the progress over perfection. And so I'm very much an action and executor So my company name is a little silly. My last name is Murray. So my company name is Mermaid International, but mermaid is spelled with an E. And at the beginning, it was just, I just need a name and I can't waste months going back and forth on what this name is. So the name didn't really matter. I was like, it's Mermaid. And now it's funny because we use it a lot in like the Mermaid Million, the Mermaid Magic. So, it's fun. It's fun. It's funny too, because a lot of my clients are men, which is just, they just lean into it and the name doesn't really matter. But the company name is Mermaid International. And I sort of have three main categories of services. The first is sales training. And a lot of the time my clients are project managers, technology advisors, like people who have to do sales and business development, but that's not their core focus of their role. When you're in construction, you're in manufacturing, you're engineer, you have to be very complex, very technical. So a lot of my background is complex sales processes. And so I have a sales training program. And it's funny too, Lovell, I thought it would just be B2B sales teams when I started, but I'm getting a lot of travel advisors, tour operators, hotel properties, like industries I wasn't expecting, but it's all the same thing. It's all of the ingredients are, the recipe is the same, the ingredients change. And so it's just a matter of how do you socket in these sales skills? And it's really around the relationship side of sales. How can you build relationships? So that's a big core of what I do. The second one is keynotes and workshops. So I'll do a lot of conferences and I'll do breakout sessions, or I have a couple of really fun keynote presentations. And then my third is more strict consulting. So if a company is trying to sell into the hospitality space, if they need a fractional sales leader, I can do that too. But those are the three themes. And it's been really fun to see how all of these industries help each other. Like I presented to the New England Inns and Resorts Association last November. And I stayed at a hotel in Boston, the 15 Beacon, which is beautiful if anyone gets to Boston. And I had a coffee with the GM, the general manager, and she started telling me about all of her construction projects she had going on at the hotel. And she needed to source a fireplace vendor and a sauna vendor. I said, oh, email Barry, email Chris, email Nate. And I just sent her a list. So it's just kind of fun how all those worlds collide. And that's one of the things when I started, I had a vision, but I didn't know how it was going to come into reality. And I think that's a big part of this faith conversation is the how doesn't matter. It's just a matter of kind of having a general direction.
The why.
And
the why matters.
Yeah. And going with the flow. And I think people say go with the flow and they don't really understand what it means. Right. And going with the flow to me just means being open to being guided and not necessarily knowing the how you're going to get there, but just having faith it's going to happen.
So I'll tell you, you're sparking so many things. But first of all, before I forget, I want to say thank you because I was having my conversation. We had just decided to get to know each other better. And we were having a conversation post the event in New York. And I was telling you that I was working on the podcast. We had not launched yet. And you said, oh, I can give you some tips on that. I didn't even know at that point that you had a podcast. And so you said, I can give you some tips on that. And I said, and in my mind, I was kind of saying, great. I feel like I'm pretty much there, but I always will have a conversation if there's something to learn. So you actually shared some of your process with me. And I took that and basically said, wash, rinse, repeat. I mean, she's already done all the work for me and just made it, instead of making it for prospecting on purpose, I made it for Unshakable. But I want to thank you for that because some of the tips that you gave me, I hadn't even thought about. And I said to my producer, ooh, we didn't even think about this. And so thank you for being willing to help. It made such a difference and it made things so much easier.
Well, and I will say, Lovell, it's not without, I kind of joke my framework in my sales training and my philosophy on everything. I call it ABAV, always be adding value. And you're always looking for ways that you can add value to other people and just like filling the other person's emotional bank account. Because at one point, Lovell, I might need a favor from you. And I'm not doing it from a transactional way, but it's almost just like this karma. It's like, okay, if you're always out here adding value to others, you just never know when it's going to come back to you. And I just have so much belief and faith because I've seen it happen so much over the years that the more you give, the more you give, the more you give, you get that back in return, whether it's from Lovell or someone else who helps me that I give them nothing in return. Like that's not how it works. If you're just coming from this mindset of how can I add value to that other person, whether it's holding the door, giving $1 out the window to someone who's needy, you have a lot of ways to add value every day.
I love that. And that is, I hope I practice that well as well. So I do want to go back and just pull the thread on something else. And that was the naysayers that thought you were really brave because you didn't have a husband, you didn't have a partner. Well, first of all, I'm going to give a shout out to my partner, my husband of 38 years, Lenny, who is literally part of my personal board of directors because I couldn't do everything I do on a daily basis if I didn't have him helping me. And I'm sure I would figure it out. And just like yourself, you figured it out. But I do want to say, like, it does help when you have people in your life that are helping you. So how did you overcome that? I'm sure that you had people that stepped up for you in a supportive way.
Totally. And I think when I first quit, one of my friends who had started an interior design business, a former client, actually started an interior design business a year before. So she and I went to sushi, and she kind of made this statement, like, I'm not running this business alone. She's like, I got my family, I've got my friends. And I think that really stuck with me because I've never been running it alone. I always have people that have my back. And a lot of them were in the form of former customers too. I think one of the people who really stepped up for me from a client side was Forbes Travel Guide. I worked really closely with Forbes Travel Guide in corporate. And when I left, I called to say, I'm resigning. Here's your new point of contact. And they were saying, how can we help you? Let us help you. We use us as references. They're one of my strongest referral partners. And I know it's because I have shared values with them and they have shared values with me. And I will just always be the biggest fan of Forbes Travel Guide because they were ones who stepped up to help. And you might get a kick out of this, but my parents obviously helped me a lot too. I ended up having to move in with my mom and dad, which at 38 years old, I never in a million years thought I'd be moving in with my mom and dad. I was very, high achiever, made my own money, lived alone for a long time in Los Angeles. So, but I know looking back, I'm going to be so grateful for that time that we spent together because it was a really fun time. And my mom and dad have had a front row seat to everything I do. They both watched our LinkedIn Live, Lovell, on YouTube. And I think my dad was in the car and watched it on LinkedIn, but they show up all the time for me. And so even though I don't have a husband, that doesn't mean I don't have a family. Doesn't mean I don't have friends. When people offer to help me, I take them up on their offer because they wouldn't offer if they didn't mean it. And so it's funny though, when I first started, I noticed a lot of the women really stepped up first, the people who could, and they say, hey, I can't pay you, but you can come speak to our team and we can record it and you can use our logo. Great. So I just took people up on those offers. And then a lot of the men in my life, I have wonderful, wonderful male mentors and male bosses. I'm pro men, but some of the guys would say, what can I do to help you? And then I'd tell them and they wouldn't do it. And sometimes I think they thought just asking the question counted as helping. And so I started to say, I said, thank you so much for offering. I will tell you that when people offer to help me, I take them up on their offer. So I'm going to give you a get out of jail free card if you want to retract that offer. And each time they're like, no, we really want to help you. And so I think that it just helped give them external accountability too, because people say a lot of stuff and then they don't follow through. And I'm just holding you accountable to what you said you were going to do. So making sure that you're taking people up on their offer to help, because people genuinely want to help. And I believe that, and I let myself be helped. And in the same way, I always try to help others.
Well, I have a personal board of directors, and I love, the people that are on that board, because when the hardest thing for me as a solopreneur has been that I used to have a team of 9 people that I could always bounce things off of, or they would call and bounce things off of me. And so I feel like every decision is like the weight of every decision is on my shoulder. So I absolutely use those people that are close to me in my life, not just Lenny, not just my husband, but others, to say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And what do you think? Just to hear their opinion about it. And sometimes just having that person to bounce things off of is so valuable when you're going through this journey. One other question that I wanted to ask you, Sara, is what about I know I've made a few over the last 3 or 4 years as I was building the Lovell Casiero brand, because as you know, I wrote a book. I also do speaking, coaching, and now this amazing podcast that I'm having a really great time doing because of all of the great conversations I'm getting to have, like this one. But what were a couple of the failures that you had? Because we all fail when we're doing something new at times. Hopefully we learn from them. But what were a couple of the things if you could go back and not do?
There's so many. There's like one a week. And I think that's one of the things where you really have to get comfortable you have to get comfortable with uncertainty, because every single thing you do, it's going to be the first time you've done it. Your example of setting up the CRM and learning Canva, like there's just always something gonna happen. Like actively right now, I transitioned my podcast from one hosting platform to another. And you can't listen to my podcast on Apple Podcasts right now because of some little broken link that I have to figure out how to fix. I had a second thing I'm dealing with right now is I have an opportunity for a consulting gig, but it might conflict with a current client. It might be challenging to help them while navigating my NDAs, because I have a lot of different NDAs. So I don't want to take an opportunity if I can't deliver. And I had a lot of red flags coming up from one of the clients. And one of the beauties of being self-employed is you get to pick who you want to work with. And I just had, my intuition is like raising this alarm bell saying, don't trust this man, don't trust this man. So I didn't know how to put in writing, any of those things I just said. I didn't want to say I can't navigate this, because I probably could. I didn't want to say I don't trust your boss, because that's not okay to put in an email. So I just never responded, and I just ghosted them. And that's so not aligned with who I am. And I finally just called the guy yesterday, because that's been something that's been a nagging, keeping me up at night, because it's not my brand. I don't want people to say, oh, Sara never wrote back to me, but I just didn't know how to navigate. And I literally told him, I'm sorry. Every time in building my consulting business, I'm coming across opportunities that are full of a unique set of challenges, and this is one of them. And I sincerely apologize for my lack of response. He and I are going to lunch on Monday. He'll be in Los Angeles. I'm going to treat him at the lunch, but I mean, every single time is doing something new. And so there's a lot of, I think at the beginning, I priced myself too high, because I knew I could deliver millions of dollars for the client, but they don't know that. And so I think if I could go back in time, I would have priced myself a little differently, because I had a lot of opportunities, and I told them the number that I think is fair and still think is fair, but it was a sticker shock for an unknown entity. Now I think I could charge that because of my bandwidth is genuine and I can prove results, but I think I priced myself too high at the beginning.
I was having that same conversation with my sister this morning.
It's challenging. Challenging.
It's hard to know, because like you said, how you deliver, but until you have some experience in that new space, that you have to prove yourself. It's almost like you have to prove yourself all over again.
It's hard.
Yeah, it very much is hard.
One thing I did that I think worked really well though, Lovell, in that situation is I did do stuff at no charge, but I didn't do anything for free or discounted. What I would do is I would offer a trade. I'd say I would be happy to train your team in exchange for a written testimonial, a video testimonial. I want to use the pictures and the video of the session for content. I want to use your logo. I want to list you as a reference. I want you to refer me to 2 other people. And people were more than happy to do that. So at the beginning, that's sort of how I did do some unpaid work just to get clients and grease the track and prove that I have an existing base. And that worked really well for me, actually. So if I could go back in time, I would be more mindful of my initial pricing and then do some of the bartering I did.
I'm going to give a shout out to HSMAI Las Vegas. As we're talking about that, I spoke for them I think it was a year ago. And I didn't get paid to speak, although I will have to say the hotel hosted me very nicely and made me feel like a celebrity, picking me up in a car and all this stuff. And it was fun. I had my sister with me, and we really got to experience how generous they can be in Vegas when they're treating you. But that was awesome. But the video that I got after the assets that I got, I would have had to spend $10,000 for that video. I mean, somebody coming out and filming that and putting that all together, and that interview, and it actually is the opening for the podcast. A lot of that video that you see came from that experience. But what if I had said no just because I wasn't getting a speaker fee? And so you do have to weigh the benefit, not just the money in the bank, but the benefit of doing what you're doing. Like speaking next week, I'm speaking at C-Suite for Christ. As we're recording this, it'll be next week. By the time it's on, it won't be next week. But I'm speaking to a room full of CEOs, and it's a small stipend, but it will give me an ability to stand in front of, 250 companies will probably be represented there. And you have to weigh the benefit over the actual monetary compensation. And I think that was very smart of you, and probably has a lot to do with the success of your business today.
I think so too. And my framework is, if I can think of 3 things I will get out of it, then it's worth doing. And I think about too, when you're building at the beginning, you're going to do a lot of things that feel like they're not moving the needle. The podcast, I'm just shouting into the void. Is anyone listening to this? That was one. I did quite a few workshops for free in exchange for testimonials and recording the workshop on Zoom. I later took those recordings and packaged it into a course that I sell for 10 grand. So it's a nice high ticket offer, but if a company can't pay me to go train their team, or if they have maybe call center employees that can't get off the phone and have to do self-paced learning, now I have this offering I didn't have before. But it's funny, I did my first big webinar in 2023. And then at the end of last year, someone who sat through that needed a speaker for their team offsite, and I charged for it, and it was a nice speaker fee. But I would have never had that if I didn't do the free thing 2 years ago. So I think about all of these actions that we take. You have no idea what those little breadcrumbs are doing, or those little seeds that you're planting. And then they start to bloom, and they are now blooming in a lot of different ways in year 4 that I just couldn't see in year 1 or 2. But now I can look back and say, oh, this is why that had to happen. And I think one of the best ways I like to look at this is, it's like the uncertainty is in front of us like a dark sky, right? You can't see what the future holds. And you have a flashlight, and the flashlight is just like your self-belief and your action. But as you start to take steps forward, the path appears with your flashlight. So even though you can't see the whole thing, you just have to keep taking the steps forward, and the path will appear. And that has been like my guiding light.
I read something the other day that was so similar to that. And it was, God may not show you the whole path, but he'll light enough of the path for you to take the next step. And, there's always enough light to take that next step. And I also think that when we get away from how much money can I make, and we lean into how much can I give of the gift that has been given to me, the gift that's been given to me of knowing how to do drive revenue at a hotel, or how to get up on a stage and give a motivational speech, or how to do a workshop, or how to put those are gifts. Like everybody is not qualified to do that. I had a conversation with this young woman today who's an artist. I can barely draw a stick people. So I didn't get that gift. But I think that when you just surrender that plan to the person that, to the God that gave you those gifts and say, use me however you will, and put the right people in my path. And then just being willing, like it's not about how much money am I going to make? It's about being willing to take that opportunity. And I'm going to use this for my own kind of litany test. I love that you said, if I can benefit from 3 things from it. And the last thing that I wanted to just comment on that you said was when you were talking about your mistakes, and you I love the story about the ghosting someone and then realizing that's not who you are. You knew that wasn't who you are, and being willing to go back and say, I shouldn't have handled it that way, and handling it in the right way. And whether you ever work for that company or not, I'll be willing to bet you that you'll get a recommendation somehow from that whole conversation. And then lastly, I just want to say how delighted I am that we had that first call. And I encourage people that are networking right now to try to find your next path or your next journey, or making that change in your corporate life, to find people that are doing what you want to do, having the success that you want to have, like Sarah's amazing story and the success that she's now having, and have a conversation. I told somebody, I cannot tell you how many LinkedIn messages I get where someone's trying to sell me something, whether it's a service or whatever. And I can't take them all, but every once in a while I take one, because I figure, what is the worst case scenario here? The worst case scenario is I might learn something. We may not work together, but down the road, they may recommend me for something. I may not buy their service. They may not buy my service. But in that conversation, we learned from each other. You and I learned from each other in the few conversations that we've had. And I just encourage conversation, like with talk about what you're doing, talk about what you can't do and what you're learning. And, maybe there's somebody watching that, would step up and tell me more about how to do Canva.
Right, exactly. And you never know where you're going to get the next lead or the next inbound person who's going to be guided, put in your path for that reason. And I would add on top of that, if you're thinking about reaching out to someone for support, one of the ways, try to fill their bank account first and add value to them. Leave a review on Lovell's podcast, subscribe to her channel, reshare stuff. There's so many ways we can promote people that don't cost any money. And I guarantee you that person's going to clock it and remember it. And then when they see your inbound that requests a call, I would be happy to hop on a call with you. Thank you so much for reviewing my podcast. There's so many ways to add value ahead of time that you're not pulling from an empty bank account, because it can go both ways. Mentorship goes both ways. Networking goes both ways.
That's right. And you never, ever I say this at, the season that I'm in my life right now. I've had a beautiful 30+ year career in hospitality. This is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life, is just give back what I've done. But I will just say that as I get older, I realize that it is less about show me the title, give me the money. It's more about, let me figure out how I can impact the people that I'm coming into contact with, not just here on this podcast, but maybe someone that I meet walking out of my office today. So, and I love the ABA. Say that again.
ABAB, always be adding value.
I love that. I love that. In closing, I can't believe this has been an amazing conversation. And again, thank you so much for the help that you provided me and the value that you added to this podcast by being willing to share the path that you had already forged. But in closing, what if there is somebody sitting out there in the same place that you were sitting at during the pandemic, when you were thinking about this vision and you were getting these messages and this discernment was coming that this is the path that you're going to start taking the steps you can see in the light, what would be some of your final thoughts to that person that's listening today?
Yeah, I think I read a book called Designing Your Life by two men. I forget their last names, but Bill and David, I believe, were the first names. And they had you keep a journal of what made you energized, what made you engaged, and when were you in flow state. And so before I left, I was thinking about what are the things that energize me? What are the things that excite me and engage me? And where am I in flow? And how can I build a business around those things? Because if that's what's going to light me up and give me the purpose and give me the why. Everyone talks about what's the why behind what you're doing. If you can focus on the things that bring you joy and light you up, that are your unique strengths, and really lean into that, I think that becomes then the North Star for whatever you want to build. And so when I started, I had my hooks in a lot of different parts of the boat, because I wasn't sure if I would like sales training. I wasn't sure if I would like consulting. So I didn't want to commit myself down a path I didn't like. But I think just finding what you are specifically and uniquely qualified to do, and then just really surrounding yourself with the people that are going to help you do it. And I think our networks are much larger than we think. It's just a matter of exactly what you said, Lovell, asking for help, adding value, and being a connector of others. Your people are going to show up for you. The path is going to appear, especially if you're doing something that you love that gives you that flow state and engagement. So pay attention to what lights you up and pay attention to what drains you, and try to outsource the things that drain you.
Yeah, exactly. I've always said too, and you made me think of this, I've always said nothing ever finishes like I think it's going to finish when I start it. So when I started writing my book, it didn't finish like I thought it would be when I started writing it. When I started FLC Business Consulting in 2015, I thought I would have one set of clients. I ended up having a totally different set of clients. And I'm seeing the same thing in this journey too. So I guess I would just say to that person out there that's getting ready to leap into your next journey and fulfilling your vision. And as Sara said, the things that light you up. I love that. I'm going to really think about this week, what lit me up, and I'm going to do more of that. But I would say to you, don't be so hooked on how it's going to end up. Just take one day at a time.
Take the steps.
And exactly one day at a time, and just go with the flow is another thing that we talked about on here. And a lot of people say, just go with the flow, but really you're still trying to control. And lastly, I think I would just say what has really helped me in these last 4.5, 5 months of building whatever I'm building is just the surrender to God, and to not being so, it's got to be like Lovell wants it, and being able to pivot when life, when God, when your spirituality through meditation says, maybe this is the door you should go through. I actually find myself now praying and thankful, my prayers of gratitude for closed doors, because sometimes what I thought was going to be a great opportunity, I end up seeing later down the road, it really wasn't at all. But Sara, it has been amazing to have you. You're obviously you're a podcast host, so you make a really good podcast guest.
Thank you, Lovell. I never thought of myself as unshakable until you gave me that language. And then I was looking back, I was like, oh yeah, that was really hard. Oh yeah, I did get through that. So I do think it's nice like reflection exercise too. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the reflection, and thank you for being my friend.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank Sara for her authenticity today, and for being a guest on Unshakable with Lovell Casiero. We will look forward to following her journey and maybe having her back again real soon. But until I see you again, always remember, be safe, be loved, and whatever you do, just be you. God bless.
I see hate through the pain, I see light in the rain. Dreams of brighter days, tell me what you're thinking. I have hope tell you once again.